It is somewhat true, as suggested by Donna Tartt in her novel, that the Divine Comedy can be incomprehensible to someone who isn't a Christian. And to truly read and understand Dante, one must, in a sense, become a Christian, if only for a few hours. Now, this idea reflects the notion that when we read, we always bring in certain presuppositions that go beyond the text itself, engaging with it on a deeper level. This is especially true when we read mainly the works related to religion. Now, before delving further into why Dante is celebrated in both the West and the East, especially now that translations of his works are available in many Eastern languages, it's important to address his complex relationship with religion, particularly Islam. In this context, I will focus especially on his depiction of the Prophet of Islam. Can we consider this portrait as something that Oriental scholars have used or drawn inspiration from? Or was it just an unnecessary approach that we find in Said's work? After discussing many works of the Western tradition, we came across the character of Mohammedo, or Muhammad, in Canto 28 of Dante's Inferno. Here, Muhammad is placed in the eighth circle of hell. For Edward Said, this is a significant example of how the Orient was viewed and intellectually represented as something unworthy or demeaning, if you will. Because if the Prophet is portrayed as evil, then his followers must be perceived the same way. Now, in this part of Inferno, Muhammad is in the eighth circle of hell, precisely in the ninth trench, a series of dark ditches around Satan's stronghold. Before reaching Muhammad, Dante passed through circles of hell that contain souls guilty of lesser sins: the lustful, the greedy, the heretics, the wrathful, the suicidal, and the blasphemous. After Muhammad, Dante encounters only the falsifiers. We know that Dante did not have a thorough understanding of Islam. In earlier cantos, he depicted Islam using imagery such as mosques burning in hellfire. The information he had was largely based on the fictional and distorted views of Islam that were common in the Christian world during the Middle Ages. Dante depicted the Prophet as a figure he encountered in the Inferno, suffering one of the most severe punishments unimaginable, split from his throat to all the way down. Following him was Ali, whose face was also divided into two. Scholars like Ivan Thompson and other Italian experts have argued that Dante viewed the Prophet and Ali as schismatics. He didn't see Islam as a separate religion, but rather as a division from true Christianity, a sect that stayed away from the teachings of Jesus. To Dante, Muhammad was a figure who created division, a sin that warrants severe punishment because, in his view, division is closely associated with the devil. Considering the Prophet as schismatic, we have two major reasons to support this view. The first is the warning given to Fra Dolcino, whom Dante depicted as someone in his own time creating a new sect. While we don't know much about Fra Dolcino's approach, it's possible that Dante knew him personally or had some interactions with him, and by warning Fra Dolcino, it becomes evident that Dante's portrayal of Muhammad and Ali has little to do with reality. Instead, they serve as warnings to others who strayed from Christianity. The second reason lies in their depictions. Muhammad is split into two, symbolizing the division he is believed to have caused. Ali, on the other hand, was considered by some in the Middle Ages to be the intellectual force behind Islam. This is why his head is split into two, reflecting the perceived division in thought and belief. When we start discussing rewards and punishments, it is important to recognize that Dante does not adhere to a single guiding principle. His ideas are scattered, and he exemplifies a poet concerned not with true or false, right or wrong, but with the essence of poetry, which for him reaches its highest dimension within the Christian tradition. And at times, even Christ seems unaware of what Dante wants to portray. However, the question arises, if someone's views are based on incorrect sources, can we really blame them For instance, if, for example, let's say Ptolemy believed that the Earth was at the center of the solar system, should we accuse him of being wrong, or should we see him as simply unaware of the truth? This is a difficult question to answer, especially when such misunderstandings impact and create problems for people who hold certain beliefs and have strong emotions attached to them. There is a long history regarding how Dante came to know about Islam, and one of the prominent figures in this context is Latini, the renowned theologian and scholar. And Latini, who wrote the Book of Treasures, was a significant influence on Dante's poetry. Interestingly, despite Latini's influence, Dante placed him in the seventh circle of hell for his misdeeds, raising questions about why Dante would draw inspiration from someone who condemned so harshly. Now, Dante did take inspiration from Latini, much like he was influenced by De Born, whose literary style deeply shaped his own, who also finds himself in hell. This fluid understanding of vice and virtue, where even something wrong contains elements of truth, is something only a poet could achieve. Dante saw Islam as a schism from Christianity, but he also depicted internal divisions within Islam, like those associated with Ali, a key figure in the split between Shia and Sunni sects. This raises the question, if Dante viewed Islam as a false religion and just another schism, why would he care about divisions within Islam itself? The answer lies in how Dante viewed the act of division as something very evil. This also reflects Dante's poetic nature, where he erases the existence of the real world and reshapes everything into an idealized vision. Taking this further into Said's arguments, who views Dante as one of the individuals responsible for shaping a distorted image of the Orient, it becomes even more challenging to imagine the true picture of the Orient as depicted by Western theologians in the Middle Ages. Including Dante, many scholars wrote about Islam inaccurately in one way or another, contributing to a flawed portrayal of the Orient. This leads us to consider how Muslims themselves perceive the correct vision of Islam, or whether a real, undistorted picture of Islam ever existed. Dante, being a poet, portrays Islam as a divisive force, which greatly concerns him. Although we are certain of his specific religious order, his depiction of escaping greed in the opening cantos hints at his influences. The problem arises when we discuss Beatrice and the other two holy women in his vision, who guide him on his life journey and send Virgil to lead him. Beatrice, according to scholars and biographers, was a girl from Florence who profoundly influenced Dante throughout his entire lifetime. Beatrice has been confirmed by historians as an actual historical figure. She lived during Dante's time, and as depicted by Dante, was his love. The story goes that Dante met Beatrice once or maybe twice in his lifetime, the first time when they were both 9 years old on May Day. Neither Dante nor Beatrice, the daughter of a wealthy person, could have known that this encounter would inspire Dante to create works celebrated for centuries as masterpieces of art and imagination. In the Divine Comedy, Beatrice is portrayed as a divine guide sent to lead Dante on his spiritual journey. For Dante, Beatrice was a figure he knew from their first meeting he could never be with, yet this realization inspired him to redefine poetry in a noble manner. Historically, we know that Dante and Beatrice never got together. Beatrice married another man, Dante married another woman. Interestingly, despite their impossible relationship that never truly began, Beatrice remained a central figure through Dante's writings, which ultimately defined him as a poet. Beatrice became an immortal figure, especially since she died at a young age, spurring Dante to start his career in writing and poetry. What we must examine are the judgments and allegories Dante associates with her throughout his poetry. For Dante, his love for Beatrice was pure and profound. When Beatrice greeted him, Dante was so moved that he retreated to his room, filled with joy from their meeting. He couldn't stop thinking about her, and eventually he fell asleep, dreaming of her. This marks the beginning of Dante's earlier work, La Vita Nuova, which he wrote before the Divine Comedy. Dante's love for Beatrice endures even after her death, transforming into a form of country love that was renowned in the Middle Ages. This type of love involved a deep emotional attachment that poets developed for someone they knew they could never truly attain. Dante's approach to poetry differs significantly between his earlier works in La Vita Nuova and his later masterpiece, The Divine Comedy. In La Vita Nuova, Dante embodies a poet deeply influenced by the literary traditions and culture norms of his homeland. His depiction of events and emotions is often straightforward and literal. In The Divine Comedy, written 2 decades later, Dante undergoes a profound transformation as a poet. Here, his writing moves away from the earthly and literal towards an imaginative and symbolic exploration of human existence. They serve as allegories and representation of spiritual and moral concepts. Dante's poetic vision in The Divine Comedy transcends the personal and embraces a broader, more universal exploration of life's complexities and spiritual truth. Now moving on to Brutus, who betrayed Caesar, and Judas, whose kiss altered Christian history, it's important to note their distinct context. Brutus is solely a historical figure, unrelated to Christianity. Known for deceiving and contributing to Caesar's death, Caesar himself was a pagan and likely unaware of Christ. In context, Judas is infamous for betraying Christ as an act that profoundly impacted Christianity. His kiss identified Jesus to those who sought to arrest him, raising questions about his motives and role in Christian theology. Despite differing religious circumstances, both figures are often viewed with condemnation of equal measures. Even if someone is responsible for the death of an emperor, they are condemned to the same degree as the one who is responsible for the death of God. This brings us to a simple idea of where we should begin exploring the Divine Comedy further. It's not about the person being depicted, but about the actions they perform during their life. These actions are everything regarding of their faith or belief. Even the debate persists that Dante had a significant impact on Oriental studies, as there is a contemporary philosophical idea that what people believe becomes true, even if it isn't real, and they act accordingly. This makes it even more difficult to view alternative images of other prophets. A good example is Jesus, who is depicted hanging on a cross in churches around the world. If Dante's depiction of Muhammad can cause problems, then image of Jesus and other religious figures should also be problematic. But this is not the case. Both religions view each other as false, yet we don't see the same issues with depiction of Jesus. The real question remains, if the depiction of Muhammad is causing problems, are people believing in it to be true? We don't have a clear answer, and we cannot endorse Dante's portrayal of such a great figure. However, we can explore its influence on Oriental studies. For Edward Said, the answer is straightforward. Dante influenced Oriental tradition. Yet, further exploration reveals a different perspective. With this, I will conclude this video. I will address other related arguments in future videos if possible. Thank you so much for watching.